Exactly what is the latte factor and how can you use it in your own life to enrich it, to live a wonderful, rich, abundant, and adventurous life? Well, in this new book by best-selling authors David Bach and John David Mann, they explore the principles of why you don't need to be rich to live a rich life. And of course, you may know David Bach from best-selling books like The Automatic Millionaire or Smart Women Finish Rich. And John David Mann is the co-author of some amazing series like the Go-Giver series with Bob Berg, and also the beautiful book, The Recipe. So these two wonderful people have joined forces to create this new book, The Latte Factor, which is out now in stores. And you definitely want to get your hands on a copy of that. Now, of course, for this video, I had a chance to sit down with co-author John David Mann to talk about The Latte Factor, a wonderful book, a parable, a story that's going to stay with you. Of course, this is about finance and financial literacy and understanding finances and how they impact your life, but it is about so much more than that. It is a rallying cry to live a life that is more joyful and meaningful. And I don't want to give too much away, but I have to say it's one of the best books I've read in a very, very long time. It really stuck with me. It's a book that you're going to want to read for yourself. It's a book that you're going to want to give to loved ones and friends. So without any further ado, please enjoy this interview with co-author John David Mann, where he talks about not only the process of writing the book, but what's contained inside. Now, of course, because we're doing things We2 style, we're going to give away a copy of the book, The Latte Factor. So all you need to do to win is to like this video and to leave a comment below in the comments section telling us what your favorite part of this interview is. That's it. So enjoy and have a wonderful, rich, and rewarding day. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am super excited because we have a very special guest, Mr. John David Mann, who is an extraordinary author and storyteller. And he's here today to talk about his newest book that he co-authored with David Bach called The Latte Factor. And just a little bit of background, John's books have been translated into over 36 languages. They have sold more than 3 million copies around the world, and he's won multiple awards for your work. So without any further ado, thank you so much for joining us, John.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. I'm so excited about this book. So you want to show us your visual aid for the, I happen to have read a digital copy. So
audio visual aid. Yes, that is the book. Although this is only a galley copy, you see a paper, but the real copy, which come out in a couple of days, it's got this beautiful gold, shiny gold foil in here. It's just such a pretty book. They did a beautiful job with this book.
Very nice. Beautiful on the outside, but also beautiful on the inside. It is, I think, hands down, one of my favorite books that I have read in the last decade or so. It was so impactful for me for many reasons. It's an instant classic, and I'm excited to learn more about the process of you creating the book and also what's contained inside. David Bach obviously talks about financial literacy and the importance of saving and all of that stuff. And I definitely saw your voice come through in the story, having read, of course, the Go-Giver series with Bob Berg. And the thing I love about this book, the parables that you write, is that, it's our human nature to retain things via story, more so than regular nonfiction where it's like a to-do list, right?
Yeah.
And this one stuck with me. And it goes so far beyond just do this, do that. It's something that really, you fall in love with the characters, but you see yourself reflected in the characters. Yeah. So
I love hearing that. That's sweet.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Can you tell me more about your writing process? Actually, first, let's go to you and David coming together to write this book, because I understand that this was a book 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't spend the entire 10 years writing, but so here's how it happened. This is a long road to get here. So way back in 2005, 2006, I met David. I had not written any books at that point. I was working as a journalist for a business magazine, and I interviewed David. I was given the task of interviewing this guy, and I didn't know much about him, but I thought, finance is going to be, dollars and cents and savings and IRAs and 401ks, yawn. I thought it'd be kind of, nuts and bolts and a little boring, whatever. And It wasn't. I was fascinated. I really clicked with the guy. First of all, he's very high energy, very dedicated, very committed. He's just such a teacher, and he cares so much about the people that he's writing for and he's teaching for. And at the end of our interview, he said something that I will never forget. He said, John, my belief is that everybody was put on this earth for a unique purpose, to do something that only they can do. And that the tragedy is most of us aren't doing it because we're too busy leasing and loaning our lives. And my mission, he says, is to help millions of people own their lives so that they can go about, get to doing what they were put here to do. And I thought, man, I like this guy. I want to know more about this. Now, David was already famous. He was already a superstar, a rock star. He had written The Automatic Millionaire, which he premiered on the Oprah show live on like New Year's Day, and I forget what year. Yeah, huge. Had sold millions of copies. Went to the #1 in the New York Times bestseller list and stayed on that New York Times list for like 37 weeks or something. He'd written Smart Women Finish Rich, and Smart Couples Finish Rich, and a whole series of books that were runaway bestsellers. He spoke everywhere. He was on TV and radio, everywhere, all over the world. And I was nobody. I was like the janitor. I was like John David Mann. And so a few years later, Bob Berg and I wrote, of course, The Go-Giver. Audiovisual aid, The Go-Giver. And at the time, it was my first, it was actually my second published book, but it was the first book I wrote that really took off. It really got notice. And Bob and I both wrote to everybody we knew, every author we knew, to ask for endorsements to put on the cover or on the inside. And I wrote to David, and he gave us this really nice endorsement that ended up on the front cover of the original edition. Right now it's on the back.
Okay.
He wrote, "Not since Who Moved My Cheese have I enjoyed a parable as much as this. You owe it to yourself to read The Go-Giver and share its message with those who matter most to you. It is a beautiful book, one that will touch your soul and inspire your heart." I was like, oh, who is this guy? So The Go-Giver came out and did really well. And that year, David contacted me and said, look, I want to write a book about this thing called the Latte Factor, which is what I teach. I taught it in the Oprah show. Everybody knows it. It's like a big thing, but I want to write a story like The Go-Giver. I want to write a book that's short, that anybody can read.
Yes.
It tells the story in a parable.
Yes.
Because my books have reached millions of people, but there's tens of millions of people that are never going to pick up a financial book. They're never going to pick up a thick, weighty, nonfiction, how you do it book. And if they do, they're never going to get through it. They just aren't. They'll read a book like The Go-Giver. I want to do that. Would you want to do it with me?
Wow.
And I was like, again, reminder, context, he's like Elvis. I'm like an earthworm at this time, right? So I was like, yeah, I think I'd like to do that with you.
Yeah.
So we started to negotiate a deal. I started to work on the concept. And then a perfect storm of issues happened. The first thing was his publisher didn't want to do it. They said, people don't buy parables, which is not true. Yeah. But that was their belief. That was their belief system. People don't buy parables. So no, it's not what you do, David. What you do is these other books. So that he couldn't get his publisher interested. Okay. And then the economy collapsed. This is the end of 2008. Mm-hmm. Right? Lehman Brothers and so forth. And the stock market crashed and people's mortgages went upside down. And suddenly the worldwide economy was in the gutter. Okay. And so David was all of a sudden speaking to a whole new set of issues and writing for a whole new set of issues. And so the book just kind of died, withered away, but did not die. So years go by. I wrote a bunch of books. David wrote a bunch of books. We stayed in touch. And then in 2015, now a few years ago, David spent an evening with Paulo Coelho. This is the author of The Alchemist. This is one of David's heroes, and one of mine too. Who doesn't love The Alchemist, right? It's one of the most popular, most, I think, impactful books of the 20th century. So Paolo was premiering a new book in the U.S. and David helped promote it, and they spent an evening together. And in the course of that, apparently they had dinner, and then they had some drinks, and they apparently drank into the wee hours. So I wish I had been there, fly on the wall. And David, at one point, Paolo said to David, "You know, what are you doing these days?" And David explained this book, that book. He said, "But what I really want to do is write this story, like your books." And Paolo said, "David, you must do it." And you know how sometimes you've heard something, but when you hear it from the right person at the right time, suddenly it lands.
Yes.
And that's what happened. So he contacted me and said, "Hey, listen, let's write this book, and I'll go find a new publisher."
Wow.
And, heck with my publisher. And so we did. We wrote the book, and we found a great publisher, Atria, who I'd written, published with before. Mm-hmm. And here it is. That's it.
Yay! 10 years. And we're so thankful for the book.
Me too.
Wow.
I'll tell you, honestly, Serena, I'll tell you that story back in 2008, the story started percolating, and the beginning of the story started happening in my brain. And this character, who is now named Zoey, who is you meet on page 1 of the book, Zoey was like living in my head with a story that didn't finish for a decade. And I was so grateful. I fell in love with the characters in this story, and I fell in love with the story itself. And I became really good friends with David. I got to know him as we wrote the book. And so I am just so happy. I feel like it's a book that can make a lot of difference in a lot of people's lives. So.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Thank you. And talk about when something, you hear it so many times, but then you finally hear it and it lands. I think that's what your book has done. This book, The Latte Factor, I think it's something that you hear, but it's so much more than just a book about finance. This parable is really it's a rallying cry. It's a manifesto for living richly, above and beyond the money. And I think that our society, it's so timely. It's so timely. And we may know it logically, right? That we're, like you said, loaning and piddling our life away on things that don't have meaning. But this is a call to, it's a cry to come back to meaning and joy and living.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have goosebumps just thinking about it. And so I think that this is one that's going to land. It did for me. Again, you can read these things, you can hear it, but when you hear the story of Zoey and, you go through her life, and you can read it so quickly. It's just, you fall in love with the characters and you can just zip on through, and highly recommended. So can you tell me about how do you co-author a book with David Bach this time? So if you are writing, you're thinking of these characters and he talks about the principles that he wants to cover, or how does that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it is kind of a weird organic process. I've written a lot. I've been editor for a lot of magazine articles and journal articles. And, you take what somebody else wrote, and then you kind of just put it in shape, dress it up, polish it, cut its fingernails, comb its hair, make it look presentable. That's not what this process is. This is totally different. So for a book like this, and I've written a bunch of books, 5 books so far, with my former Navy SEAL friend, Brandon Webb. It's similar with him, which is I have to kind of learn his stuff. In the case of David Bach, learn what he teaches, learn his principles, learn his kind of his mission. What is he all about? Not just what does he say, but what does he mean, and what drives him? Kind of learn him, and then internalize that, and then weave that into a story. I've never done this, but I think it might be something like what it's like to be a film actor and portray somebody famous in a movie.
Okay.
If I'm Rami Malek playing Freddie Mercury or whatever, you have to represent that character, but also you have to bring yourself and your own experience to that kind of and blend them, or else it won't land with the audience. It won't be real. So with the story, The Latte Factor, practically how we did that is we discussed a few ideas. I spent a day with him in New York City, where he lives. We talked some ideas over. And then I wrote a draft. and I sent it to him, and he was very involved in the process. There were a lot of things that didn't really work for him. He said, I don't think this is right. And, originally Zoey had a different name, and originally she didn't live in New York City. She lived in some small town. Originally it was a painting in an art shop, and she was catching a bus. And he said, no, it's got to be like now and in New York City, and it's got to be a subway, and it's got to be a photograph. And so we worked a lot. We kind of took the clay and molded it a lot, even down toward the end, to the point of individual words in the language and stuff. And he would say, that word just, I don't even know what it means. What is this 5-syllable word? What is that? So we worked on it a lot together.
Okay.
And a lot of the experiences in the book, there are individual experiences that reflect things that have happened to David. There's a scene late in the book where Zoey is talking with someone, has a very meaningful conversation that's similar to a conversation that David had with his grandmother on her deathbed. It's kind of an echo of his life experience. But there's a trip to Mykonos that's very, very crucial in the book, or there's a scene, a photograph in Mykonos, which is a scene that I witnessed when I was 13, when my mom and I went to Greece. And so there are experiences of mine, like on the coast of Maine and in Mykonos and in the New Mexico mountains, that come from my life. And then there are all kinds of scenes and conversations that come from David's life, and it just all goes into this story.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So that's how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's a great explanation. Thank you so much.
The goal is for it to be real, it's for it to be flesh and blood. And it's fiction. We made these people up, but at the same time, it's
everybody.
It's real experience, real flesh and blood, real emotion, it's real. It's got a pulse to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And perhaps, how much can we say before it's released? I don't want to give it all away.
I know.
I don't want to give it all away. Can you talk about these principles? Because again, it goes far beyond just financial. So can you tell us a little bit about, the 3 principles, or at least some of the principles, and then one of them is a little bit different.
Exactly. Seemingly, exactly. So Serena is not being coy here, everybody. This isn't like, don't give anything away because it's a surprise. It isn't like we're being coy and don't want to talk about spoilers. It goes back to something that we talked about a little earlier, which is that a lot of the ideas in this book are things you've heard before, the things that we've all heard before, but in many cases, things we've heard but we've never actually done ourselves. Principles that we know, but for some reason haven't put into action. And why? Because they seem out of reach, intimidating, too complicated, too difficult. And the character Zoey herself, this is what happens to her through the story, is that she's learning from this character, Henry, who is really David Bach disguised as an elderly barista. David's last name is Bach. Henry's last name is Haydn. Composers, you see the kind of the thing.
Just made the connection.
Yeah. little writer's tricks. Writer's disguise kit. Anyway, she's learning all these things from this character, Henry. But she's not really taking it in. She's kind of learning it sort of in an abstract way from a distance. She's learning it and she's absorbing it and she's kind of sorting it. But it isn't personal for her. She still kind of holds these ideas at arm's length. In the back of her mind, it's like, I kind of see that, but it would never work for me. It's just not me. It's just not what I do. It's just not going to work in my life. Until, again, a scene near the end of the book where she has a conversation with somebody close to her, which is like her Paulo Coelho conversation, where all of a sudden, because this person says this at this time, it lands for her, and it starts to be real and come to life. And then she puts it into practice and it becomes her life. And that's, like you said, that's the goal of this book. So the reason that we don't want to give away certain things in the book is like a process of discovery that you really want to walk through and find yourself. But so without being coy, I will say, so there's these 3 principles of financial freedom, 3 timeless principles of financial freedom that the book is organized around. And the first 2 have to do with very simple process for laying the groundwork for your financial potential, for your financial future. And the third, which in a sense should be the first because it's the most important, but it's third because she had to get the foundation laid before it made sense. Yeah. The third principle is live rich now. Live rich now. And the idea there is, you think about the idea of saving for retirement. What is retirement? For most of us, retirement is like some abstract thing that, quite honestly, maybe doesn't mean that much. Mm-hmm. This has always been true for me. This book had a lot of meaning for me. When you're in your 20s, being in your 60s is almost half a century away. When you're in your 30s and your 40s, it's still decades away. I'm in my 60s now. I can't believe it. How did I get here? But it still seems abstract to me because I'm, busy writing and so forth. So this like retirement thing is abstract. People don't care about abstractions. People don't care about saving. They don't care about retirement. They don't care about the future because their life is now. And so David's talking about making your dreams come true. The purpose of this book is to set you free from the monthly grind so that you can live your dreams. But for a lot of us, when we hear live your dreams, we think about something kind of ideal and pie in the sky. Like, well, I wish I had a house on, Tahiti, or the California coast, or I don't know what, I had all my time free to travel around the world. We think these sort of fantasies that could only happen if we made a lot of money or attained a lot of freedom we don't have today. And that's not what we're talking about. It's not what David's talking about. He's talking about some way of creating your dreams in the here and now, in the life that you have, with the limitations that you have. And David's whole thing is, you don't need to win the lottery or be a genius at the stock market or get an inheritance or a huge raise in your salary to be able to create financial independence. You actually have what it takes in your current life to put the pieces in place to create financial independence. I will show you how. The third secret is the why. It's why. And the plain truth of it is, if you don't, it's like everything in life, right? If you don't have a strong why, you'll never do the what and the how. Yeah. Because it isn't important to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it isn't until really the end of the book where Zoey starts to identify what matters to her. What does she really want to be doing?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's why, on the cover of the book, it says, subtitle is, Why You Don't Have to Be Rich to Live Rich.
Yeah.
He really is talking about being rich. I mean, financial freedom is the goal of the book, ostensibly, pragmatically. But what he's really talking about is having a rich life every day, not just at some point in the distant future.
Which was amazing. That was, everything coming together. You have to wait for it. And of course, you also don't want to rob everybody the joy of going on this discovery if we were to talk too much about it in terms of the exact what. But I think, the perspective and choices that we make, and I have not seen the world the same since I finished the book. Like every time I go, I'm like, so it landed for me. I was like,
oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think that's going to be echoed. I mean, I know already you're getting so much positive praise from people like Brendan Burchard and, Michael Hyatt and of course, Bob Berg, who's amazing, and Robin Sharma and Darren Hardy. So there's quite a few people who are very excited about this book, of course, and authors, many of them are authors as well. So can you tell me maybe, am I allowed to ask you this? Okay. Can a writer have
You're allowed to ask anything, Serena.
Okay, thank you so much. Can a writer have a favorite part of a book? Does it happen? And what would be your favorite part?
It's funny. I thought you were going to say, can a writer have favorites among his books? Because being a writer is like being a parent. You're not supposed to have a favorite kid in your, but it's hard not to because they're all so different. And I have my favorite books too. But favorite parts in the book. It's funny. I do have some favorite parts. I have a lot of moments in the book that are really meaningful to me, because either because they reflect something that happened in my life, or just because of the way I felt when that point came. If I don't cry while I'm writing it, you're not going to cry while you read it. If I
Okay.
don't laugh while I'm writing it, you're not going to giggle when you read it. So, I've got to have the experience when I'm writing it. So, um, the first person who really got a kick out of this book was me, to be quite honest. I was writing it. But, I have a lot of moments. I mean, her conversation with Georgia, the woman from not Texas, from Oklahoma, rather. Her conversation is one of my favorites. I think it's very poignant. I love the moment where Zoey is with Henry and Baron, this old Baron. She's like, oh God, we're going to have the budget conversation. She hates the idea of budgets, and Henry goes, okay, I think maybe this is time to talk about budgets. And she's like, hey. And you can tell she's checking out. And he says, the first thing you need to know about budgets is, the first thing you want to do with budgets is throw them in the trash. They're garbage. They don't work. She's like, what? Totally expecting that he's going to say, here's how you have to work a budget. Instead, what he says is budgets are BS. They work, they may work for corporations. They should ideally work for governments. They don't always work for government. But for individual human beings, there are those rare individuals who thrive in a budget. We keep them like unicorns. We pet them. We put golden chains in their ankles and save them in cages, and we call them comptrollers or CFOs or whatever. Yeah. But for most of us mere mortals, budgets are like anathema. We hate them because they're like diets. They feel like strictures. They feel like prison.
Yes.
A budget is fundamentally the word don't. Yeah. And we want to live. Human beings have appetite. We want to live by the word do.
Yes.
So they go contrary to human nature. And so the shock that Zoey experiences when Baron and Henry tell her the budgets are balderdash, I always get a kick out of that because that's just me. I mean, when I heard David say that, I was like, okay, I can listen to this guy now.
Fabulous. Oh, I love it. That was a good part for me too. I was like, yes,
Yeah.
budgets don't work. So fabulous. Again, one of those moments where it is about finding, and that's what I think this book does so well, is about getting you closer to your dream and your why in the now. It's hopeful.
Yeah.
For everybody who's going to read it. It gives them hope and a reason, and to live in the now and to work on these principles.
And we did something maybe a little weird. And as you read it, you find it's in the first chapter. We started the book out, and credit to David, this was his idea, and then I work with it, and turn it into the words. But the scene starts out, Zoey is experiencing this kind of weird morning where something is just like bugging at her, and she's going through New York City, down where 9/11 was, and in the rubble, out of the rubble of 9/11 they rebuilt that part of Lower Manhattan where there's this thing called the Oculus, this huge transportation center, where she walks through every day. David can see the Oculus out of his apartment window. So we were like meeting right around there talking when we first started writing the book. And she goes to this thing and she ends up sitting, she sees this huge billboard that shows a picture of an airplane, or rather of a boat, beached in the middle of a desert. Weird picture. And it has a caption that says, if you don't know where you're going, you might not like where you end up. And it nags at her. And she ends up sitting by the reflecting pools, which are built around the foundation of the original 9/11 of the Twin Towers. And she's sitting there thinking about the thousands who've died. And I say it's weird because it's, you might think it's almost like a morose or macabre way to start a book, reflecting on 9/11. But what it is she's got this nagging feeling of like, where's my life going? Life, we don't say it in as many words, but the meaning of it is, life is so precious. You never know when suddenly, 9/11 will happen. You never know when your life will take a turn. You never know what will happen. Every day is so precious. Every moment is so precious. And she's like, what am I doing with my life? Where is it going? So that sets the stage of this journey. It isn't just, man, I'm having a hard time making my bills, or I feel like I'm in the rat race.
Yes.
It's also like, why am I here? What's my game plan here?
Absolutely. That's, I think, part of the magic of this book. And the Oculus, the concept of the
Mm.
Oculus, and when you bring it back at the end, it's like, ooh, that's good. That was one of my favorite parts too.
Mm.
That stuck with me. So you have to read book to hear it, to read it, to understand. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about who is this book for?
Mm.
Who is this book for?
Yeah.
And, what are people, I mean, we've talked so much about what people are going to get out of this book, but let's stick with
Yeah.
that one. Who is this book for?
So Zoey, the main character, is a 28-year-old professional woman working and living in New York City. Actually, she lives in Brooklyn, works in Lower Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I am not a 28-year-old woman, and there are a lot of people. David isn't one either. There are a lot of people who will read this book who aren't 21-year-old women named Zoey. But in one sense, in a narrow sense, David really wanted to aim this book at young women, at women between the ages of, anything up to, 30, let's just say arbitrarily, or 35 or whatever. He has always written for women because women have historically taken a backseat financially. They're not only they paid less, but they tend to be they tend to live longer than their husbands. They tend to be. This one blew my mind. I think it's 1 out of 10. Or is it 1 out of 8? I forget the statistic now. It's in the book, but I've suddenly forgotten it. But what it boils down to is a lot of women end up alone and with a lot less financial resource than men who end up alone, because they're paid less, they save less, they're less financially literate because they're taken less seriously, and they learn less, and there's a catch-up going on for women. And so David has always been passionately devoted to financial education for women. It's how he got his start in writing. Smart Women Finish Rich was his first book. It's always been his mission. But that said, although we aimed it at Gen Z and millennials and so forth, for baby boomers, it's just as relevant.
Yeah.
There are, my generation are people ending up saying, man, I didn't save enough. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And here I am. And is it too late? And am I stuck? So it isn't just for people starting out in life saying, how shall I chart my course? It's also for people who are in later stations of life saying, well, I'm that boat in the desert. I didn't know where I was going. I don't like where I ended up. What can I do from here?
Yeah.
David is fond of saying, and I'll repeat it often, it's never too late. It doesn't matter what situation it doesn't matter how much debt you're in. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how underemployed or underpaid you are. And it doesn't matter how, behind the 8 ball you are. The strategies and tactics of this book and of the rest of what David teaches, anybody can put into practice. He even has a book called Start Late, Finish Rich.
Wow. Yeah.
So.
And that's the
Long
hope,
answer.
and the hope that comes like from this book. And again, so long as we told through this parable, anybody can start and live richly now.
Yeah.
You don't have to be rich to live rich, right? So is there anything else? And we love that mission. Of course, we're part of the Women's Entrepreneurial Exchange. So all about empowering women. So this is a perfect place to read this book. We're going to read it for book club. I'm super, super excited.
I'm excited about that. I'm so glad you're doing that. I appreciate that. That's going to be fun.
We're so excited. I'm just honored. I'm so grateful that you're here speaking to us. I think it's really special. And I thank you again. And I'm looking forward to seeing you later in the book club. Yay.
Yeah, me too.
Fun. And is there anything else that you feel you'd like to share about this book? Maybe like something that you personally have come away with, having written the book and having started thinking about it 10 years ago and as an author, as an entrepreneur,
Sure. I mean, here's the point out of the book, but it's one that I think, it struck me and it struck me when I first talked to David, and it struck me again while writing the book. And it's one of those concepts that like you get it and you go like, well, duh. I mean, I get that. And yet at the same time, it's one of those that I really didn't get until some time had passed. And it's this. One tends to think that, I'll preface it by saying this. I have a book I wrote with a guy named David Kruger called The Secret Language of Money. And David is formerly a former psychiatrist who's become an executive coach. And his specialty is the stories we tell in our heads and the ways that we live our lives as a story we're writing. I love that topic. And David has this quiz he does. He asks people two questions. The first question is, what amount of monthly income would you need to handle your life? Not fantasy island, but just to handle everything, to really to make your life manage. Great. What's that number? Great. Then what are you currently making per year? And he said, typically, people are currently making about half of what they say would be ideal. And he's worked with clients for many years to the point where he'll ask them many years later when they've increased their income. And he's often finds people who have increased their income up to that ideal level. He asked them the quiz again, and now the amount they would need to handle their life is, again, twice as much. So if they needed 200 grand and they were making 100 grand, a couple years later, now they're making 400 grand. But now they need, now they're making 200 grand. They need 400 grand. Then they make 400 grand. They need 800. Whatever the scale is, if you're making $10,000 or $100,000. And here's the principle. Principle is this. We think that to make our lives work, we need more income. And we think that if we make more income, we will become richer, or we will have more opportunity to be financially free. Yeah. And it's not. It rarely happens. Almost universally, that doesn't happen. What happens is you increase your income, you even double your income, you even triple your income, and you are no more financially free than you were before. It's shocking. And then you look at people who suddenly win the lottery or get a big contract, become sports stars, become athletic stars or movie stars or, pop stars, and they make these fortunes and then they lose it all or whatever. Yeah. Happens all the time. The problem is we take our habits with us.
Yes.
Income grows, but then our expenditures grow. Yes. And the way that we manage the flow, it's the geometry of it, the daily habits of it, don't shift, don't change. Absolutely. So it's not about how much you make. You can make the exact same income you make today, but with a shift of habits, a year from now, you can be in a really different place financially. And that's really the message I hope lands for people.
That message landed for me. I think it's like even the choices, being conscious and conscientious about how you move through the world. I mean, from a financial perspective and just in general, right?
Serena, I'm 65 years old. Actually, I'm not 64. I'll be 65 very soon. My financial life has changed radically from a year ago because I wrote this book. Wow. I mean, this is a principle that I didn't really get. Through the years when I was completely broke, through years that I made a lot of money, then the years where I lost it all, and then years where I made more. I've been up and I've been down, and I never got this principle. I never understood what it meant in my life. And now I do.
From this book?
From writing this book with David.
From writing this book. Yeah, absolutely. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Again, one of those that will stick with me, one of my favorite books. And I'm so excited that it's a gift. Mwah. And a purpose that's going out into the world. And, everyone's here to do something, as you said, David Bach said, and certainly I believe that. And I'm sure you believe that, obviously. And so thank you for the gift of your writing and for gifting the world with this book. I am so excited to share it with my community and the world, and you'll keep us posted. And so, of course, the big question, where can we find this book and what date?
The book comes out May 7 of this year, and you can find 2019, and it is everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, iTunes, iBooks, blah, 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 blah. You can also, of course, always find it on my website, which is just my name, John David Mann, 2Ns.com.
Again, thank you so much. Truly, since I've finished the book, I have not gone into my wallet without like, is this an economist or is this a latte, Again, things we hear, but because it's told in story form the way you so beautifully, and I for sure heard your voice, right? I could see the mix of the two people. So
see me hiding in there. Yes.
Beautifully done. Like it must be something else to collaborate on such a project.
It is. It's really interesting. And there is a moment, and it's a series of moments, but there's kind of there's a point where you feel like it's starting to like come to life. It's still early on, it's a mess, it's unfinished, but still you feel like, okay, this thing is like I can feel the heartbeat, the pulse.
Absolutely.
I just want to say I love talking with you, and I appreciate the chance to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the book club.
Me too. Thank you so much. So grateful. Thank you. Wishing you all the best. The success that I know is coming from this book. I mean, well deserved. You know, it is a gift
Thank
to
you.
the world. So thank you.
Thanks.
I hope that you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed sitting down with John David Mann to talk about this amazing book. We have an extra surprise for you though, which I'm really, really excited to share with you. So just before we go there, I'm going to remind you that you can grab your copy of The Latte Factor by visiting some of those links below. You can get it digitally, you can get a hard copy, you can get audiobook. And if you want to win a copy, all you need to do is to like this video and to tell us in the comment section what your favorite part of the interview was, and we will reach out to get you a copy of the book once we've done the draw. Now, as for a surprise part, if you visit we2network.com, links in the description as well, you'll see that we have a book club, and we're going to be reading now The Latte Factor in our book club. And super special bonus, John David Mann is going to return to our private digital room, our Zoom room, where he's going to share with us after we've read the book. We're going to have a chance to ask him questions. We're going to have a sit down just with him and members of our community to ask questions and talk about the book. So if you want to know more, that's just one perk of being a We2 member. If you want to know more, you can visit, you can reach out to me personally at we2network.com and figure out how you can get in on that action. All right, have a wonderful day, and remember to live a wonderfully rich and adventurous life.